Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jax McCarty, tell you about the names you need to know in the college football and NFL landscapes that could be changing the football landscape in the very near future. So, episode 3 of a 4-part little mini-series where we're picking the best prospect to watch on each team in the NFL, maybe the most, or one of the guys that you maybe haven't heard about yet, a name that you need to be more familiar with as we enter into the season. Now, if you've been paying attention over the last 2 episodes that I've already released, you'll have noticed that there was a limit as far as they could only have played 2 seasons to this point, aka going into their 3rd season or younger. Now, we're going to have to make an exception today because there's one specific team that I was looking at. I really couldn't find anybody that I really liked as their prospect to watch. Then I found this specific player, and I'll point it out. I'll make sure that you guys are well aware of it whenever it comes to that player. But it won't be the first team we look at. The first team we're looking at is the Buffalo Bills, since we're doing the AFC and NFC East. So the Buffalo Bills, they're losing quite a bit of receiving yards with Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders leaving. So I think it's Gabriel Davis's time to step up to the plate. Buffalo has spent the offseason trying to convince people that the running back room is going to be a large focus this year. I don't believe them. I simply don't. When you have a quarterback like Josh Allen who can throw it all over the field, and by the way, he can basically be your run game too, I think you stick with what you know, and realistically what could have gotten you to the Super Bowl if it wasn't for one coin toss. So, like I mentioned, Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders leaving, that opens up the wide receiver 2 position just wide open. I know Jamison Crowder is there now. I don't really see him becoming a wide receiver 2, especially not at this point in his career, but I think he'll be a reliable slot receiver as Gabriel Davis kind of becomes Stephon Diggs' running mate. Last year, Gabriel Davis was very efficient whenever they let him on the field. He had 15.7 yards per catch and was making plays at any point in time that they needed him. And, I mean, just to keep it simple, I don't see any reason why that can't continue this year. He is a very talented receiver. We got to see quite a bit of that in the playoffs this past year against Kansas City, where I believe he had over 200 yards. It's very clear how talented of a kid he is. I just think that he needed a little bit bigger of a share in Buffalo's offense moving forward, and that's exactly what he's going to get. So yeah, Buffalo, maybe it looks like they've lost quite a bit of receiving talent in their wide receiver room, especially. They only got better at tight end with Dawson Knox and O.J. Howard there now. But I think they've got the bodies in there to fill up the stat sheet, especially with Gabriel Davis, and there's a couple other guys in there as well. Now, one thing that I have tried to stay away from throughout this has been to stay away from quarterbacks because it's such a high volume position, and it's kind of weird to project a breakout year for very many quarterbacks, either because they haven't been in the league long enough to really be comfortable whenever you're looking at your Trevor Lawrences, your Zach Wilsons, etc., or you're looking at guys who, like Daniel Jones, or some of these older starters that just haven't really worked out yet. Tua Tagovailoa is the pick for Miami simply because Miami's offense has become too good for him to fail. If he fails, he's no longer a starting NFL quarterback. As simple as that. And largely because when you have a player like Tyreek Hill, you had Jalen Waddle last year. Mike Gesicki is good. Mike McDaniel was explicitly brought in to make this offense something that it hasn't been in the past. If he can't figure it out here with all this stuff around him and an incredible running game now, I think they've added enough talented running backs to where one of Chase Edmonds, Sonny Michel, and Raheem Mostert are going to work out, I believe. And once you have that situated, you've got the other 2 as kind of rotational pieces for that guy. There's too much good happening for this team now where if Tua, again, if he can't make it click, he's more likely than not a backup in the NFL. Luckily, I do believe Mike McDaniel is going to make this thing work, and I believe Tua, the way he plays, is very reminiscent of Jimmy Garoppolo, who, by the way, Mike McDaniel was just offensive coordinating for in San Francisco. They got pretty deep into the playoffs with a quarterback like that, and a lot of people consider him a game manager and somebody who you really can't win a whole lot with. Tua is going into an offense that I could argue is more talented than San Francisco's was last year. I know you have Debo and George Kittle and Elijah Mitchell. I think that Miami's probably more well-rounded, and Tua, I would argue, also has more potential than Jimmy Garoppolo. So there's too much kind of going in his favor here for me to back off, because if he doesn't make it work, I mean, again, I do think he will. He wouldn't be on this list if I expected him to fail. I've liked Tua since he came out of the draft class and out of Alabama. We've been waiting so long to see it finally click. I think this year is the year where he makes things happen. So next we go to the New England Patriots, who very well could be either the third or the last team in their division next year, and a lot of that is because of how weird the offense is starting to shape out. We can't figure out who the offensive coordinator is. The wide receiver room has gotten a little bit better, but you're still not in love with it. There's just so many question marks around it. So I'm staying away from the offense for my prospect watch here. I'm going to my old reliable with the New England Patriots. It's easy to take a defensive tackle here. That's exactly what I'll be doing. Christian Barmore, you can tell whenever you watch the tape on him that his athleticism and his strength and just everything comes together well. You can tell why he was a first round draft pick. And there's a lot of promise behind him too with the linebacker room. I think Matt Judon last year was a big help, and you can qualify him as an edge rusher, a linebacker, whatever you want to call it. Josh Uche's out there. Still don't think he's ever really panned out. Could have been an option here, but he's got to be behind Judon. You've got some options out there where you have that help right behind you, and that's only going to help the defensive line with being able to trust what's back there. And you really, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the defensive line for New England is really going to depend on Christian Barmore stepping up to the plate. You still got Lawrence Guy, but he is kind of the be-all, end-all, especially now that Chase Winovich is gone. You've got to figure it out, and I think Christian Barmore, with how much trust that they've put into him now, by really not feeling the need to add all these extra pieces to kind of make up for what he's lacking, I do think he takes a big step up here. So we move to the final team in the AFC East, and actually the team that I had mentioned, New England, might be fourth. This is the more likely of the options in my opinion, but it's the New York Jets, and there were a couple options here. Mekhi Becton would have been a shoo-in, but there's too much worry right now around him with weight and the injury that he's coming off of. He wasn't supposed to miss near as much time as he did. So I'm going with Elijah Moore. This one feels like a layup to me. He's so fast, like ridiculously fast. He's underrated tough. Got good hands. He's got a low catch percentage. He only had one drop last year against 55.8% catch percentage because the guys who were throwing him the ball weren't particularly great. I think we can all acknowledge that the Jets were not fielding stellar quarterback play last year. You hope you can get it from Zach Wilson moving forward, but even if you don't, I think Elijah Moore is enough of a playmaker to where when you look at Terry McLaurin in Washington, how many quarterbacks of his can you name? That's the problem. There has never been a consistent one, yet he's still a very, very talented receiver and can be recognized as such because of how he's performed with those quarterbacks. Elijah Moore could very well be in the same boat, or he could find his quarterback of the future with Zach Wilson. I'm not here to really decide that, but I do think Elijah Moore can kind of become independent of the quarterback play strictly because of how much you're going to scheme him into the offense because of how talented he truly is. And he was a receiver that a lot of people liked coming out of his draft class, but you weren't really sure where to take him, especially with how talented the wide receiver class was that year. So I feel like him going to the Jets and it seeming like he might be wide receiver 2 behind some of the other guys they've got in the building, I'm not worried about it because I think the talent is going to rise to the top, and Elijah Moore will become a wide receiver 1 this season. So that completes the AFC East. We now move to the NFC East. Dallas Cowboys. Trevon Diggs last year, he stole headlines for how many interceptions he was getting, and he also had some of those reported yards that he was allowing up that just didn't make any sense for how many turnovers he was getting. Well, they need somebody across the field from him that's going to be able to shut it down. That's why I picked Kelvin Joseph. In the limited time he played last year, you could tell the talent was absolutely there. He should have been on the field more and was really good when he was around. My big draw here is that he's not an interception magnet. That's not really his thing. He got 4 in his lone season at Kentucky, but you see a lot more physicality and willingness to focus on breaking the pass up as opposed to trying to make that flashy play, which Trayvon Diggs did a wonderful job of, but it also came back to bite him a fair few times. So what you're looking for, and it's kind of ironic that I'm bringing this cornerback duo out because one of them used to be a former Dallas Cowboy, but look at Byron Jones and Xavier Howard in 2020. One of them was an absolute ball hawk, wasn't horribly worried about the extra yards let up, and then the other one, Byron Jones, he was shutting down one side of the field, didn't really get all that many interceptions because you knew better than to throw at him. And that's what I'm looking for Dallas to kind of establish, because if they can do that, then your corners are set for 5-10 years, so long as you can get them back on the payroll. And really, what more could you ask for in a pass-heavy league if you've got two cornerbacks you can really, really trust, and they're both going out there and doing their own thing while being able to work in harmony? So that's the Dallas Cowboys. And next we move to the New York Giants, which this is where my loophole came from. I really don't love their roster as it stands. There's a couple rookies that I like, but we haven't seen them play, and I am trying to stay away from rookies in this. Kayvon Thibodeau to name the most prominent, but there is a fourth-year player going into his fourth season now where I really do see a lot of promise as far as coming into the Wink Martindale defense, and that's Julian Love. Wink Martindale, as a defensive coordinator, loves that high-velocity defense, and Julian Love is going to be able to bring something reminiscent to what the Giants used to have with Landon Collins, playing in the box, getting physical, and really being the enforcer for this new defensive scheme. Having Xavier McKinney out there beside you really, really helps. Xavier McKinney is a very, very talented safety. I almost put him here, but it didn't feel right because last year he had a fair few interceptions, played really, really well. So I don't even know that you can call him a breakout player to watch because he's already put up the stats. He just needs more recognition. So the safeties will need to be the reason that the Giants defense is not bad. And I think Julian Love can fill in that second half of that to where we know Xavier McKinney is going to be able to cover. And you're looking at the cornerback room, you're not in love with it. It's Dory Jackson, Aaron Robinson, Darnay Holmes. There's plenty of question marks, but I do think Julian Love's will take one of those question marks off the board with how talented he plays this year. Next, we move to the Philadelphia Eagles because their offseason has really transformed them, at least in my eyes, as to what they're trying to do. Last year, I didn't get the impression that they were necessarily trying to win. They just felt more like, we're going to see what we have. Jalen Hurts outplayed what they expected him to. So now they are going all in by adding A.J. Brown. But one part of their team that is still a big question mark for me is running back. But I think Kenneth Gainwell is going to take over the role and really become a staple of the Philadelphia Eagles offense. I'm tired of waiting for the Miles Sanders breakout year. He's had multiple 800-yard campaigns. I think he had just like 750 last year. So I'm not willing to wait around for it anymore. And luckily, they have Kenneth Gainwell, who both is a Memphis running back, which is almost a skill in and of itself right now with how many Memphis running backs are coming out when you're talking about D'Angelo Williams and Antonio Gibson and Tony Pollard. Everybody loves Tony Pollard right now. The list goes on. Darrell Henderson as well for the Rams. That in and of itself is kind of a pro at this point. Plus, he brings enough value as a receiver and a running back that I don't think you really have to worry too much. Maybe you get a power back in there to help him, but he adds all this extra layer of versatility that I think Philly is really going to be looking for, especially for a quarterback who we don't associate with having a strong arm in Jalen Hurts. Sometimes that shorter receiver might be what's best for him, and Kenneth Gainwell can provide that in spades. He had varying levels of success last year, but he wasn't given much consistency, so I can't really knock him for having bad games because whenever you're going out there and maybe one week you're getting 4 snaps and the next week you're getting 17, then you come back and you get 7 and you're bouncing all over the place, it's hard to really establish yourself because a lot of times I can imagine it doesn't feel like you're really working for anything. You're working for your role in a 3-man rotation, but there's really no promise to go up and above that. As far as a player, he's got that sneaky toughness that I mentioned with a player earlier. Super fast, he finds the gap. And one thing that was really worth noting here, Landon Dickerson could have absolutely been the pick here it just so happens that he was phenomenal before he got injured, and the O-line as a whole coming back to full health is going to be a very good thing for Kenneth Gainwell, or realistically whoever ends up being the primary running back in Philadelphia. So that leaves one more team for us, and that brings us to the Washington Commanders, who they're going through it. They're always going through it. But with Jack Del Rio's comments and Daniel Snyder being Daniel Snyder, and I mean, just everything under the sun, you've got to find your silver linings. And I think Benjamin St-Juste, from everything I've seen from their OTAs right now, he might be the guy to watch. Jahan Dotson has been the biggest headline stealer for Washington so far, primarily because he is a first-round pick at a position that didn't really seem all that weak going into the draft. But, I mean, he's been turning on the Jets and making a show, so we're trying to stay away from rookies yet again. So Jahan Dotson immediately out. There's a couple different players that maybe you could look at, but a lot of Washington's defense right now is either they're either established well beyond the time frame of this, or they're really, really young to like rookie standards. Chase Young is a former defensive rookie of the year, so calling him a breakout player to watch doesn't feel right. He was just injured last year. Montez Sweat has already been breaking out. I think a lot of people are very familiar with Montez Sweat at this point. So there's not a whole lot here to choose from, at least on the defensive side. But Benjamin St-Juste last year really could have been used better. But the issue was he just kept getting concussions. I believe he had 3 last year, and that's of course a worry when you look at Washington. You see Jordan Reed, for example, who was a phenomenal player for the organization. He kept getting hurt, and that the best ability is availability. But I'm going to give Benjamin St-Juste the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully he can kind of avoid that. And you're seeing a lot of weirdness from the cornerback room right now too, because Kendall Fuller was a mixed bag last year. He got better when they moved him out wide. William Jackson right now does not look good in camp, so that's a bit of a worry. And I think Benjamin St-Juste realistically is the next man up. Maybe you have Percy Butler, who's a rookie. He doesn't look all that great right now in camp either, but I think he would be better suited to play free safety and take Bobby McCain's job. So there is definitely a window for Benjamin St-Juste to step in here, either at slot cornerback, or maybe you try to move William Jackson inside. I'm not the defensive coordinator nor the head coach of the Washington Commanders, so I'm not going to try to figure this out for them. But I do think Benjamin St-Juste, with the length and the speed and the general talent that he has, I think Washington would be well to utilize him, especially if he can stay healthy. And with this extra year of learning the playbook, I think that he comes along quite a bit compared to last year. So those are the next 8 that we've had from the NFC and AFC East. If you would change anybody, if you have any comment, maybe there's somebody you really liked that I overlooked, feel free to leave it in the comments or send me a tweet on the Twitters. They'll be in the description below. But that is now episode 7 of From My Perspective. As always, I'll see you next time.